High school graduate? Why is someone like that even sitting here? I suddenly felt suffocated. It was a mixer at the weekend. I only agreed to join as a last-minute addition because my best friend from school begged me. But I never expected to be met with such blatant rejection. I was used to people looking down on my education. So her words didn't bother me as much as the sheer arrogance and self-centeredness of someone like her. Was this just how daughters of CEOs turned out? There's this whole idea that education isn't everything, but come on, a high school graduate? That's just unbelievable. This is a waste of time. I can't stay in such an embarrassing place. With that, she threw down her words and stormed out of the restaurant. The heavy silence that fell over the mixer never lifted, and the night ended in awkwardness. To me, she was just someone I happened to meet at a random mixer, someone who lived in a completely different world from mine. That should have been the end of it. So, I never could have imagined that our paths would cross again after she had so thoroughly dismissed me. The next time I saw her was at a prestigious award ceremony. When she spotted me standing on stage, her eyes widened as if she were witnessing something completely impossible. A soft blue spotlight illuminated the entire stage, and the hall was filled with distinguished guests. Among them were industry leaders and executives from famous corporations. Why are you here? That night, she would come to deeply regret the way she had treated me. And from that moment on, both of our fates would change forever. My name is Henry. I work in architecture. As both a designer and a planner, my days are thankfully busy. Today, I had carved out some time to travel all the way to the outskirts of a rural area. A former museum, huh? As expected. The architecture from the era when foreign influences began to arrive is full of inspiration drawn from new cultures. There must have been a lot of greenery around this place, too. I took photos from every angle of the abandoned museum, carefully studying its structure through the slightly crumbling walls. Exploring old and used buildings like this was something of a personal passion. For someone in design, there's always something to learn from the past. As I wandered around the building, a sudden gust of wind rustled through the air, carrying a faint sound with it. Perhaps because I was completely alone in this place, my feet instinctively moved toward the direction of the wind. It led me to what must have once been a pathway to the museum, lined with overgrown trees that framed the trail like an arch. These leaves, cherry blossoms? So, this row of cherry trees must have been a part of the museum as well. Maybe I should come back when they're in bloom. Looking at the tiny buds beginning to form, I felt the quiet power of nature. I understood the strength trees and flowers possessed. Especially cherry blossoms. I loved them. No matter where I was, I would always find myself looking up at them, drawn to their quiet beauty. They had carried me through more difficult times than I could count. When I gave up on going to college and decided to learn architecture while working, it was beneath the cherry blossoms, waiting for them to bloom, that I made my decision. The project I was working on now was something I wanted to incorporate the theme of harmony with nature into. That was precisely why I had been offered the job. It aligned with my core philosophy of blending architecture and the natural world. As I stood there, reflecting on both nature's comfort and the work ahead, something unexpected happened. My personal phone started vibrating. Feeling slightly annoyed that my peaceful moment had been interrupted, I glanced at the screen. A familiar name was displayed. Hey, what's up? Aren't you at work right now? Henry. The sheer volume of his voice made me pull the phone away from my ear. It seems like he called from the office. From the yelling, I can tell they're being scolded for something. I waited for a moment before speaking again. So? What's going on, Keith? Henry. I'm in the biggest crisis of my life. I've never been this cornered before. I need your help. What? This was Keith. My best friend since middle school. He had graduated straight from Japan's top national university and was now working at a major corporation, what you'd call an elite. Despite that, he had always been a down-to-earth, kind, and genuine guy. He never treated me any differently. Even when I was the only one in high school who didn't go to college. I was grateful to have a friend like him who remained the same over the years. And now, out of nowhere, he was asking for my help. Okay, calm down and tell me what's going on. If it's something I can do, I'll help. We're one guy short for a mixer. A 2-on-2, and we're missing one guy. That's a total disaster. You'll help, right? Man. I knew I could count on you. I nearly dropped my phone in sheer exhaustion. Keith was brilliant, but he was also unbelievably scatterbrained. I clenched my teeth to keep my irritation in check. A grown man over 30 calling me at work about something like this? Seriously? Just to clarify, you're telling me that you were scrambling to find someone for a mixer, couldn't find anyone, and decided to call me in the middle of my workday, sounding like it was an emergency? You do remember I hate these things, right? Of course I do. That's why I already asked people I met through work first. But I couldn't find anyone, so I called you as a last resort, knowing I'd get yelled at for it. I was even ready to cancel. But then, the girl, she's one of my juniors from college, sent me a message saying, I'm really looking forward to it. And I didn't want to take that away from her. Henry, is it really impossible for you? I let out a deep sigh. This was just like Keith. He always put other people's feelings ahead of his own. Even the fact that he waited until the last minute to ask me was so typical of him. Fine. When is it? Keith practically shouted his thanks. Then I heard his boss yelling at him again in the background. I chuckled at the familiar scene playing out in my mind before hanging up. The mixer was set for the weekend, and thankfully, I could make time for it. I hated these kinds of events, but I figured I owed it to Keith to at least show up and not ruin the mood. Before I knew it, the weekend arrived. The restaurant was in an upscale district, surrounded by high-end establishments. Mixers had gotten pretty expensive these days, apparently. I wrapped up my work and rushed to the venue. When I arrived, the waiter led me to the table, where Keith and two women were already seated. I immediately regretted agreeing to this. Still, I greeted them and took my seat. Keith was leading the event, as expected. It was a simple 2-on-2 setup. I felt bad for being the extra guy they had to drag in, but it was too late now. At the very least, I had to make sure everyone had a good time. But by the time I realized that this wasn't a normal mixer, but rather an evening of amusement for a spoiled rich girl, it was already too late. The women were Lily and Monica happened to know Keith. Monica was Keith's junior from university, which meant she was also an elite. My first impression of her was that she was kind and attentive, always smiling. Lily, on the other hand, exuded an unmistakable aura of privilege. While the rest of us had barely sat down, she had already started drinking her wine without waiting for a toast. Apparently, she used to work at the same company as Monica and was her friend. But even at a glance, they seemed like complete opposites. The atmosphere of the mixer was carried by Keith's lively energy and Monica's calm presence. At some point, I had even forgotten it was a mixer, simply enjoying it as a casual dinner gathering. But then, the woman who had remained silent until now suddenly spoke. Come to think of it, I haven't asked you yet. Where did you graduate from? I heard you're in architecture now, but... Ha? She had interrupted the conversation just to ask about my academic background. I could feel the air in the room freeze. Keith and Monica stopped mid-motion, their faces stiff. My education. Well, I only finished high school. High school graduate, you say? Her face twitched ever so slightly, and she seemed unable to hold back her next words. Still wiping the condensation from her glass, she didn't even try to hide her irritation. In this day and age, someone who didn't even go to college. How can you sit here without the slightest bit of shame? Her voice, calm at first, gradually rose in intensity. Her slightly raised eyebrows and squared shoulders made it seem like she was standing above me, looking down. To think I'm having dinner with a man who only finished high school. How embarrassing. Right, Monica? Were you mocking me by introducing me to someone like this? She turned to Monica, but Monica was too stunned to respond. As if I could sit here, smiling and eating with someone like him. It's humiliating, a complete waste of my time. I'm not saying education is everything, but in my world, high school graduates don't even exist. I see. She was that type of person. The kind who saw education as a ranking system and looked down on anyone who didn't meet her standards. I had met people like her countless times before. So, I simply responded with, I see. Keith, desperate to salvage the situation, scrambled to redirect the conversation. Well, yeah, Henry is a high school graduate, but he owns his own firm now, and his annual income is. Oh, so he clawed his way up from nothing? How impressive. She looked at me again, but my unwavering expression seemed to irritate her even more. Monica, I said I wanted to do something fun and student-like for a change, but if we're doing a mixer, at least make sure everyone's on the same educational level. I'm done here. Let's go, Monica. Okay. Without a second thought, she dragged Monica out of the restaurant. Keith and I were left at the table, just watching them go. A few moments later, Monica returned, quickly finishing her now melting sorbet. The heavy atmosphere never lifted, and the mixer ended in silence. Keith gave me a gesture, indicating he'd call me later, and I found myself walking alone through the quiet streets. More than anything, I felt bad for Monica. She had genuinely been looking forward to this. Just as I sighed, lost in thought. Henry. I turned to see Monica running toward me. Monica? Wait, weren't you going the other way? What's wrong? I just wanted to talk to you. I wanted to apologize. I could already guess what she was apologizing for, but the fact that she had run after me meant she truly cared. I nodded, and we began walking slowly in the direction she had come from. I'm really sorry for how Lily acted. Her family owns Anderson Construction. You've probably heard of it, given your industry. I used to work there, too. But my connection to Lily goes back even further. My mother was a housekeeper for her family, so I practically grew up working for them. Monica spoke while looking down. It was probably not a pleasant memory for her. The fact that she had once been a servant and Lily a noble daughter made sense, considering how Lily had treated her in the past. I quit Anderson Construction years ago, and I hadn't seen Lily in a long time. Then, out of nowhere, she demanded I set up a mixer. I knew how she was. She truly believes that education and social status define a person's worth. I thought maybe she had changed over the years. So I agreed, So, when I showed up as the replacement, she got pissed off that I was just a high school graduate. No, that's not. I mean, I'm really sorry. Keith didn't know anything, I promise. He spoke so highly of you. I was actually excited to meet you, too. I let out a hearty laugh, trying to lighten the mood. Keith likes to exaggerate. I'm still a work in progress. I did eventually get a degree through a correspondence program, but back then, I had to work while learning everything on my own. And honestly, nothing's changed. I'm still working my ass off. I grew up in a single-parent home, with a younger brother to support. I had to provide for my family, but I also wanted to study architecture. Guess I'd been selfish since I was a kid. Monica lifted her head slightly. I kept my gaze forward, but my mind wandered back to those days. My family was never well off. My father passed away when I was young, and my mother, who had no family connections to rely on, worked tirelessly to raise me and my younger brother. The only luxuries we had were birthdays and cherry blossom viewing. I especially loved these outings the three of us would take together. With a lunchbox packed full of my brother's favorite omelet, we'd head to the cherry blossom-lined riverbank near our home. "Mom, why don't cherry blossoms bloom all year round?" "They're so pretty." "That's because cherry blossoms work really hard. They endure and wait so they can show you their most beautiful flowers in spring. That's why they're so special." I love them, too. Even now, I still remember the way my mother spoke as we gazed up at the trees in full bloom. It was thanks to her that I never grew resentful of our poverty. But all the years of hard work took their toll, and by the time I was a second year in high school, my mother had to quit her full-time job. Our financial situation became even tougher. Even with my part-time wages added in, covering living expenses and both my brother's and my education was a constant struggle. So, I gave up on college and took a full-time job at the construction site where I had been working part-time. I can never forget the look of guilt on my mother's face when I told her I wasn't going to university. That's why I enrolled in a correspondence program, so she wouldn't have to feel that way. I had always been interested in architecture ever since I started working, and despite the grueling schedule, I managed to become a licensed architect. My brother successfully graduated from university, and my mother was finally able to live comfortably without overworking herself. Before I knew it, I had entered my 30s. But my family's happiness was my happiness. That was enough for me. And I got to do what I loved, architecture. I had no other wishes. "Henry?" "Oh, sorry. Anyway, you really don't need to worry about any of this, Monica." I checked my watch to make sure I'd catch the last train, then looked back at her. Monica seemed restless, opening and closing her hands as if hesitating over something. Then, all at once, she turned to face me. "I think you're amazing, Henry. You're someone who works hard. Not many people can become a licensed architect while working. And the way you didn't even flinch at Lily's remarks, that was really cool." You think so?" The station came into view, and I saw that I'd make it in time for the last train. Feeling a little embarrassed from her praise, I tried to change the subject by mentioning it. That's when I noticed. She had lightly grabbed the sleeve of my suit. Her face was slightly flushed as she whispered, almost hesitantly, "Would you meet me again? Just the two of us this time?" The train arrival announcement played in the background, but all I could focus on were her eyes, locked onto mine. A week later, I found myself in a grand ballroom of a luxury hotel. Wearing a properly tailored suit and neatly styled hair for the first time in a while. Since that mixer, I had barely spoken to Monica. My days remained as busy as ever. In fact, things might get even busier from now on. Because today was the award ceremony for one of the most prestigious architecture competitions, an event every architect dreams of winning. Winning an award here would skyrocket my reputation. And if my name gained recognition, I could provide an even better life for my family. That was the only thing that truly mattered to me. I felt a bit self-conscious about getting ahead of myself, but before I could dwell on it, a staff member guided me to my seat. As I walked, I couldn't help but notice the names of the sponsors displayed prominently around the venue. Anderson Construction, the top sponsor of the competition. And in the VIP section, I spotted none other than Mr. Anderson and Lily. I hadn't given our last encounter much thought, but I definitely still remembered it. I never imagined I'd run into her again, especially not this soon. For a brief moment, I wondered if I just had incredibly bad luck. 10 minutes before the ceremony began, the judges started entering. Then, the event officially commenced. The opening remarks by Mr. Anderson, the introduction of the judges, and the announcement of the winners in each category followed. Each winner was required to give a brief speech on stage. I was a finalist in the environmental symbiosis category. I was confident in my work, but as the announcement approached, I felt my heartbeat quicken. And now, we move on to the environmental symbiosis category. The grand prize winner is Henry. I clenched my fist slightly and stepped up to the stage to give my speech. More than anything, I wanted to share the news with my family. But I kept my focus and spoke from the heart. Then, suddenly, bang! The sound of something hitting the floor echoed through the hall, drawing everyone's attention. But just as quickly, their gazes returned to me. I will continue striving to be an architect who bridges people and the environment. Thank you very much for this incredible honor. I concluded my speech as if nothing had happened and returned to my seat. From where I stood on stage, I had seen exactly what had caused the noise. Lily had dropped her phone the moment our eyes met. After the award ceremony, there was a scheduled networking session with the judges and sponsors. But honestly, I was considering skipping it. Something told me it would only lead to unnecessary trouble. However, shortly after the award ceremony quietly came to an end, Mr. Anderson quickly approached me. Standing beside him, avoiding eye contact, was Lily. Henry, congratulations once again. I'm Travis Anderson, CEO of Anderson Construction. This is truly an incredible achievement. Starting from nothing, building your own firm, and winning this prestigious award at such a young age. It's no ordinary feat. I've been in this industry for decades. And I can tell you, people like you don't come around often. Absolutely remarkable. He let out a hearty laugh and gave me a firm slap on the shoulder with his large hand. To be honest, when my daughter told me she had to suffer through a meal with a high school graduate architect, I thought she was joking. I assumed you were either some nobody or, at best, running a small workshop. But the more I learned about your work and achievements, the more impressed I became. And then, just a few days ago, my daughter started acting strangely. When I pressed her about it, imagine my surprise when she admitted the person she was talking about was you. Now that was unexpected. I stayed silent, letting him speak. I must say, Henry, you are even more impressive than the rumors suggest. Lily, come on, now. This is fate, isn't it? At least introduce yourself properly. You won't meet architects of this caliber every day. Even with her father's prompting, Lily's response was curt. About the other day. I apologize. She barely looked at me, her gaze slightly averted. Mr. Anderson let out a low, pointed cough, his sharp eyes watching his daughter. Lily, that's rude. You saw the presentations of the competition, didn't you? Do you even understand who you're speaking to? Lily flinched slightly. With clear reluctance, she straightened her posture, took a slow breath, and spoke again, this time, properly addressing me. Let me formally apologize for the other day. My father is right, your award-winning project was truly outstanding. I look forward to working with you. She met my eyes briefly, her demeanor slightly stiff but earnest. From a distance, she still looked like the perfect refined lady. But speaking with her directly, I could sense a certain awkwardness. Even after being reprimanded, her personality hadn't changed. She was still very much herself. I gave Lily a slight nod and replied as gently as possible, likewise, I look forward to working with you. She lowered her gaze slightly, then gave a careful, polite bow before looking away again. Even as she stood there, I couldn't help but notice how striking her features were up close. Now then, Henry, as the hottest architect in the industry right now, I have a proposal for you. Let's move to a more private setting and talk. I hesitated. Having a strong relationship with Anderson Construction would be an enormous advantage. But if things went south, my firm could be crushed in an instant. After a brief internal debate, I decided to hear him out. The discussion took place in a suite on the hotel's top floor. The offer was that Anderson Construction wanted to collaborate on my latest project. This project is a revitalization plan for a regional resort facility. Since they wanted to make full use of the natural surroundings, they reached out to me, as I have always promoted harmony with nature. It's a major project. Having a powerhouse like Anderson Construction involved would be a huge advantage. I was worried about potential conflicts, but Mr. Anderson assured me that he fully understood the importance of preserving the local environment. In the end, I chose to trust him. And so, this massive project officially became a collaboration with Anderson Construction. But the real surprise was that Lily was assigned as their liaison to my firm. 2 weeks later, after securing partnerships with additional companies, the project was officially in motion. As part of the initial phase, I traveled to the site with the project leads for a field assessment. Of course, Lily was there. She was our point of contact with Anderson Construction, so that was expected. What I hadn't expected was that the representative from one of the collaborating firms was none other than Monica. We hadn't talked about work at all during the mixer, so I was completely caught off guard. Wow! I can't believe we get to work together, Henry. Let's create an amazing facility. She beamed, her enthusiasm evident. Meanwhile, Lily remained as composed as ever. She was wearing a suit, but with high heels, completely impractical for the location. Her expression was difficult to read. I chose not to say anything and instead headed straight for the site. The abandoned resort facility stood in stark contrast to the rich natural landscape surrounding it. It was clear that the original developers had tried to replicate an urban-style resort, completely disregarding the character of the area. The three of us stood there, reviewing the documents while taking in the scenery. Then, Lily finally spoke. "This place is so rural. It's just mountains everywhere. Why don't we just expand the land and turn it into Japan's largest resort? There's no point in preserving any of this." Lily. "All right, Lily, Monica, we have a meeting with the city officials and local residents next. Let's attend and hear what they have to say." Lily's expression made it clear she had no interest, but Monica managed to drag her along. I figured the best way for her to understand was to experience the situation firsthand. The community hall was packed. It was obvious how deeply the residents cared about this land. As soon as the meeting began, opinions started flying. Would it be possible to restore the land and plant new trees? Our first priority should be preserving the nearby mountain ecosystem. Most of the concerns were about the environment. Monica diligently took notes, fully engaged in the discussion. Lily, however, just watched with an uninterested expression before muttering under her breath. They built a resort because they were poor, right? And now they want to protect the environment and fix their finances? That's such an unrealistic dream. It's almost funny. She probably thought she was speaking quietly. But the entire room had gone silent, and every single person turned to look at her. Even Lily, usually so composed, seemed caught off guard by the sudden attention. I immediately grabbed her arm and pulled her outside. The moment we were out of the hall, she yanked her arm away and snapped at me. "What are you doing? Are you saying I'm wrong? You're not wrong. The fact that this town is struggling financially is a reality. That's why they built the resort in the first place. See? They're being ridiculous. Clinging to their land, lacking proper education, and still expecting some miracle." Before she could finish, I instinctively grabbed her wrist. She must have thought I was angry because her body noticeably flinched. "Listen, Lily. These people want to coexist with nature, but they also know they need financial stability. They're trying to do this the right way. And as an architect, I plan to fight for that, to build a facility that protects the environment while drawing people in." I suddenly realized I had let my emotions take over and quickly released her. I thought I was staying calm, but I had clearly gotten too heated. Because this architecture that coexists with nature was my core philosophy. An awkward silence fell between us. just as the thought crossed my mind that Lily might say she wanted to leave. I'm only here because it's my job. I don't care about the environment or whatever. I'm going back inside. As a company heiress, she wouldn't face any consequences if she left. It might just be my own bias, but I couldn't help feeling surprised that the word job came from Lily. For the next few days, we stayed in the area, visiting various locations and speaking with the residents. Some were wary of us, seeing us as nothing more than outsiders planning another large-scale development. But in those moments, Monica's sincerity and approachable nature smoothed things over. And at some point, without a word, Lily had switched from heels to sneakers. She joined us in every activity, barely taking breaks, walking through the mountains in town more than anyone else. One morning, before the sun had even fully risen, I stepped outside of our lodging only to find Lily already standing at the entrance, fully dressed and ready to go. "You're up early. You were up late last night organizing documents, weren't you?" "Morning. I'm heading out first." She brushed off my concern and started walking away. I hurried to grab my things and followed after her. "Wait, hang on. It's still dark out, and these mountain paths are dangerous. Besides, today's schedule doesn't start until the afternoon. Even the city officials said it was fine to take it slow." That's exactly the problem. That whole "we'll do it later" mindset is how people end up missing what's truly important. She finally stopped and turned to face me. The early morning light cast a faint glow on her profile. And for the first time, she didn't look like the proud, untouchable heiress I had come to know. I used to say, the countryside is just mountains and nothing else, it's just an idealistic dream, remember? Back then, I truly believed that. And I even mocked the idea. But, after actually stepping into the mountains and hearing the stories of the people who live here, I finally realized something. I finally understood how much this place has been cherished. And yet, I dismissed such a valuable land as a boring, insignificant place. When I think about that, I can't help but feel frustrated with myself. She tightens the laces of her sneakers and continues in a calm voice. "I want to learn more about the thoughts of the people who grew up here and how they interact with nature. Because I was the one who denied it with my words, I have to take responsibility and face it properly." That's what I feel now. If all I had to do was help with my father's work, then I could have just followed the same profit-first approach. But now, I don't want to destroy it, I want to protect it. That's why, even if it means heading out before dawn, I want to go wherever I need to go. I follow her as she starts walking again without even pausing to catch her breath. Honestly, part of me wants to stop her, thinking it's too dangerous. But the determination in her eyes is undeniable. "All right. Then I'll go with you. Let's check the map and plan a route that isn't too reckless. And we should also let Monica know. Geez, hurry up already. And if it gets too tough, you better tell me. I don't want you collapsing because of my selfishness." "Hey, that's my line." She gives me the faintest smile at my response. Then, without another word, she presses forward. The woman in front of me now is nothing like the arrogant person who once looked down on me at that mixer. For a while, we continue walking in silence along the mountain path. Then, in a small voice, she begins to speak. "You know, I used to look down on people I had no connection with. Probably because I was raised as a privileged city girl. I had all these baseless assumptions, like thinking people without a degree are nothing or that the countryside is just a bunch of mountains and nothing more." Her words make me widen my eyes for a moment. Hearing such an honest reflection from the same woman who once acted so high and mighty is surprising. But after actually talking to people, I realized how amazing they are. The workers in construction, the people who have lived here their whole lives. No matter their circumstances, they all keep moving forward, learning skills and wisdom that I never even considered. She pauses for a moment, lightly touching the back of her neck as if feeling the cool mountain breeze. And you too. Back at the mixer, I said awful things like high school graduates weren't worth anything. But the truth is, you're far more grounded in your work and life than I ever was. When I think about the way I used to act, I feel so ashamed of myself now. That's not true, I reply, a little unsure of how else to respond. Even I have only been pushing forward blindly all this time. I wouldn't say I've walked a path worth being proud of. But when I see the unwavering look in her eyes as she gazes at me, a strange warmth stirs in my chest. Even if you don't think so, to me, it is true. I spent so much time looking down on others. Now, I have to learn as much as I can to make up for that. Her words echo clearly in the still mountain air. The sound of our footsteps against the earth begins to form a steady rhythm again as we continue moving forward. So, I'm going to need you to stick with me a little longer. I want to check out the unmarked trails, the spring we passed earlier. I need to see it all for myself. It might be a hassle, but would you mind? Of course. I'm learning a lot too. Let's go. Seeing her smile again, just a little, I feel a genuine smile of my own forming. It felt like we were finally bridging the gap between us, one small step at a time. And so, like breaking through the darkness, we press on along the mountain path. The reason she's putting in so much effort walking these trails and exploring every detail is because she wants to understand the very land she once looked down on, but this time, in the right way. That much is clear. Later that afternoon, we stop by a small tea house at the edge of the mountain for a break. The woman running the kitchen is friendly, and when Monica orders some sweet red bean soup, she shares some with everyone. "Oh dear, young lady, why don't you try this too?" "Thank you very much." Lily hesitates at first but accepts the offer with a small, grateful smile. But as I watch the scene unfold, I notice something off. The other customers are giving her cold looks. Isn't that the girl who mocked the countryside before? Yeah, I think I heard something about that. It was meant to be a whisper, but their voices carried surprisingly well. Apparently, word had spread about something Lily said a few days ago, something about how she had dismissed rural life as a fantasy. The locals must have overheard it. The air in the tea house suddenly feels tense, uncomfortable. I heard she's from some big company in Tokyo. Talking about coexistence with nature, bet it's just lip service. Frankly, I wish she'd just go back where she came from. Feels like she's just here to look down on us. The sarcasm is blatant, and even Lily freezes in place. Her face tightens as if she's been doused with cold water. She doesn't even try to argue back. Monica looks like she's about to step in, but I know I have to act first. "Excuse me, may I say something?" As I step forward, all eyes in the tea house shift toward me. We're here because we genuinely want to create something that respects the wishes of the people living here. And she feels the same way. I understand that she may have said things before that upset you. But I glance at Lily. The usual confidence she carries is gone, her shoulders slightly hunched as she stares at the floor. She won't make the same mistake again. And honestly, she has no intention of looking down on this place anymore. I'm asking you, if there's anyone willing to talk to us, to share what really matters about this town, we'd love to hear it. We want to make sure we build something meaningful here. Some of the townspeople still eye us warily, but after a moment, the older man who spoke first lets out a sharp breath through his nose and mutters, "Well, if you're gonna go that far, I suppose we can talk. But are you telling me she actually walked those mountain trails? Didn't she show up in heels?" "No. She changed into sneakers and hiked through the mountains for hours with me. She was the one who said, if we want to protect nature, we need to start by stepping into it ourselves. Honestly, she's been pushing herself harder than even I have." The man raises his eyebrows, clearly surprised. His gaze drifts toward Lily, who still stands stiffly, uncertain how to react. If they'd imagined her as some spoiled city girl in heels, the sight of her now dressed down, dirt on her sneakers, must be a stark contrast. Well, can't say I liked what she said before. But I'll admit, if she's really been walking those trails, maybe she's not just blowing smoke. We'll listen for now. But we're not making any promises. At those words, the tense atmosphere in the tea house begins to soften, even if not everyone has let go of their distrust. I let out a quiet breath of relief. And then, a faint voice was heard, and when I looked, I saw Lily stepping into the center of the tea house. She had her eyes lowered, but then she lifted them and looked straight at the residents, as if she had made up her mind. I did say awful things about this town. That's a fact. And I'm sorry. But after walking through these mountains, talking to the people who live here, I realized how much history and care goes into this place. I felt the warmth of this community, and I don't want to destroy that. I don't want to take anything away. I want to help share what makes this town special. As she bowed politely, everyone there looked surprised, as if they hadn't expected it. Then, the owner of the tea house hurries over, gently patting Lily's shoulder and helping her straighten up. In a hushed voice, she murmurs, "Thank you." And so, the commotion settled down for the time being, but the atmosphere remained somewhat somber. Even so, not a single person tried to drive Lily away. The fact that she was able to apologize on her own was a significant step forward. After that, before we left the tea house, a few residents approached us and said, "I don't really get it, but I'll listen this time." They also left us with words like, "Yeah, if you're trying to make this place better, I guess I don't mind." As we walked back along the quiet mountain road, Lily remained silent for a long time. Then, just barely above a whisper, she murmurs, "Thank you." I didn't say anything and simply glanced at her sneakers. After a brief silence, as if trying to cover up her embarrassment, Lily started walking a little faster. On the last night of our site visit, I find myself outside, staring at the sky. The stars are so clear. I didn't think you could see this many in Japan. Whoa! I nearly jump at the sudden voice behind me. It's Lily. Monica already went to bed. She was running around all day. Yeah, I respect her for that. When someone puts that much effort in, people can't help but take them seriously. Honestly, I'd love to have her at our office. I throw out the joke lightly, but Lily's reaction is unexpected. Her face turns bright red, and before I can process it, she grabs my arm. What? Hey, I worked hard too. I asked questions, I hiked through the mountains. Me? Do you even understand how big of a deal that is? Or does a high school graduate like you not get it? The words might be harsh, but there's no real malice in them. In fact, she's sulking, almost childishly. When I let out a small snort of laughter, Lily pouted even more and gripped my arm tightly. I left her hand as it was and started walking slowly. Then, I stopped in front of a large tree. There are many long-lived cherry trees like this one in this area. I heard that some were cut down when the previous facility was built. That really makes me sad. As I spoke quietly, gazing up at the cherry tree swaying against the night sky, I felt Lily's grip on my arm soften just a little. I think that makes me sad too. I don't really know why, but after talking to everyone, the thought of them losing something important just doesn't feel right. That's why we'll make sure that doesn't happen. I'll make it work. I'm stubborn like that. Well, I guess it's my job to stick around and see just how much you can actually do, Henry. She lets go of my arm and starts walking back toward the inn. Even in the darkness of midnight, I felt like I could vaguely see Lily smiling at me for the first time. I was happy, feeling like I had gotten to know her a little better. Thinking that maybe my feelings had reached her, I felt glad that we had come here together. But I never expected that decision would change her life so drastically. A few days after we returned from the site visit, I got an unexpected call from Lily. At first, I assumed it was work-related. But something felt off. She just said she needed to talk, and her voice had an unusual weight to it. We decided to meet that night. By the time I finished work, Lily had come to the office. She looked a bit solemn, different from her usual confident demeanor. I led her to a seat and started preparing coffee. "Lily, did something happen at your company?" She stayed silent for a moment, gripping her hands tightly. Then, she suddenly lifted her head, eyes locked onto mine. "Henry, hire me." "What?" Wait, hold on. What about Anderson Construction? Did your father tell you to come here?" "No. I reported everything to Dad. I told him everything I saw, everything I felt. I told him that I believed in your vision. And do you know what he said to me?" Lily's expression changed visibly. She was probably remembering what happened at that time. Then, she began recounting the conversation exactly as it had happened. Just a few hours earlier, Lily had been in her father's office, presenting her report. However, after looking at the report, Mr. Anderson said this to her. "Lily, what is the meaning of this? Are you telling me that, essentially, that young lad was right, proposing that our company should prioritize environmental conservation and coexistence?" His voice was already laced with fury. Lily shifted slightly and, as if making up her mind, opened her mouth to speak. She tried to convey to Mr. Anderson exactly what she had seen on that land, the deep impression the residents' voices had left on her, and the value that couldn't be measured by profit alone. However, before she could finish, a loud bang echoed through the room as someone slammed their hand on the desk. "Business is about profit. Nothing else matters. I've drilled that into you since you were a child. If it doesn't make money, it's meaningless. Do you think environmental conservation pays the bills? And what's more, you were supposed to use that young man, not be swayed by him." In contrast to Mr. Anderson, who was raising his voice, she couldn't find the right words and bit her lip. She hadn't expected such a strong rejection. "Have you really been swayed by the lowest of the low? If you're going to be this useless, then consider yourself disowned." After declaring that in an unusually low voice, Mr. Anderson slammed the file shut and leaned back in his chair. His words lingered in the air like a sharp blade, leaving the room in complete silence. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her throat was dry. The only thing left between them was the thick stack of reports on his desk, a silent testament to everything she had worked to understand. I'm frustrated." With that, Lily fell silent. The thought that Mr. Anderson would cast aside even his own daughter for the sake of profit made my anger quietly simmer. Lily took a sip of coffee, then suddenly raised her voice as if she had made up her mind. I slammed my resignation down along with being disowned. I don't even know why I got so angry. I never even questioned things before. Maybe I shouldn't have gone to the site. Every time I get rejected, that day flashes through my mind. I just keep thinking, if your vision of a place that connects people and nature became a reality, how happy would they be? Her voice wavered, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Then, she straightened her back, formally facing me. "I won't obey my father anymore. I know I'm being selfish. But please, just for this project, at least let me work under you. I want to understand what it really means to connect people and nature." She stood up and bowed deeply. If this had been right after our first meeting, I probably would have turned her down without a second thought. But I had seen how she gradually changed through our site visits. There was no reason not to accept Lily, who was holding back tears as she pleaded to break free from the world she grew up in and learn something new. Just as I opened my mouth to say, "All right, welcome aboard," she suddenly sniffled and mumbled, "I've never begged for anything like this before. If I end up being completely useless, you can fire me." Whoa, whoa, hold on. Why are we already talking about firing you? You have no faith in yourself at all? Well, I was a total snob. I kept throwing around high school graduate this, high school graduate that, and, I was awful. It's so embarrassing to think about now. Her face was flushed, and she rubbed her eyes roughly. Lily was holding back tears, her lips pressed together tightly, trying so hard not to let them fall. Somehow, I found it a little endearing. Well, I won't say you were the absolute worst from the start, but yeah, you were pretty damn rude. You really remember all that? Fine. I admit it. And I'll apologize for it. I'm sorry. It's fine. Honestly, I was a bit defensive back at that mixer, too. But now that we're working together, what matters is what comes next, right? When I laughed, she furrowed her brows slightly, looking a bit dissatisfied. You're laughing a bit too much for someone I just apologized to. I'm being serious here. No, it's just... I can't believe you're the same person from back then. Flustered, she quickly pulled out a handkerchief and covered her face. The contrast between her usual composed, refined demeanor and her current panicked state was oddly amusing. I barely stopped myself from laughing outright. All right, then. Welcome aboard, Lily. She finally finished wiping her eyes and looked up at me, letting out a small smile. It was so natural, so soft, that for a moment, my heart skipped a beat. Thank you. I'll be in your care. A brief silence passed between us. I felt the awkward atmosphere from before fade away as if it had never existed, replaced by a vibrant change. And just like that, Lily officially became my employee. Well, since I had been working solo, it was more accurate to say my company doubled in size overnight. She insisted on starting from scratch, learning everything like a brand new hire. Lily, who had struggled even with something as simple as answering the phone, spent her days in a constant rush. Her favorite phrase was, "I have no connections here." My guidance may have felt strict to her. There wasn't a day when I didn't worry that the job might become too hard for her. But I had a feeling that she didn't want to work in an environment where people just went easy on each other. At times like that, Keith and Monica were the ones who supported me. Yo! Man, the office looks way livelier now. Henry, having a young woman around really brightens the place up, huh? Oh. And look who I ran into. Monica's here, too. Keith, Monica. When I heard you quit Anderson Construction, I was shocked. Have you gotten used to the job? Henry is at his busiest right now, you know. Yeah. I need to adjust to regular work as soon as possible. I think this is the first time in my life I've been sleep deprived. But it's also the first time I've ever felt like praising myself this much. As Lily continued chatting with Keith, Monica walked over to me. Henry, she's changed. At home and at work, she used to act like a princess, completely obsessed with status and hierarchy. She used to believe people existed to serve her. But now, she's working for herself and others. That's because of you. No, she did that herself. She broke out of that shell on her own. I glanced over at Lily's desk, where stacks of notes and scribbled memos were piling up. And I smiled. A month had passed, and Lily was now able to handle the basic tasks on her own. Because of that, I was able to focus more on the resort reconstruction project. Our contract with Anderson Construction remained in place. I knew we needed to have a proper discussion again before things officially got underway. However, things had already begun to unfold. One afternoon, I returned from an errand to find Lily rushing toward me, her face pale. Mr. Norton. We just got a call from the city. The deal to purchase the land from the previous owner has been canceled. What? Why now? This project was based on the city buying the land of the closed resort facility and rebuilding it. I had been entrusted with designing the new facility under that plan. In other words, if the city backed out of the purchase, not only would all our plans be scrapped, but unless a solid buyer was found, the land would be left abandoned. I immediately called back, but the only response I received was that they had decided to drop the project. Mr. Norton, something's not right. This is too sudden, and they didn't even consult us. As I sank into thought, Lily lowered her brows and looked at me, covering her mouth with her hand. It might be my father. Anderson Construction is no stranger to pressure tactics and underhanded deals. Even though she had cut ties with him, Lily still looked apologetic. I gave her a light pat on the shoulder. Even if that's true, you're part of this team now. You have nothing to apologize for. We have a meeting with Anderson Construction in 2 days. We'll get our answers then. But my father. He's far more cunning than you think, Henry. He might be planning to crush you. I gave her a reassuring smile. It was highly likely that Anderson Construction was behind all of this. I had to get to the bottom of it by the day after tomorrow. If I didn't, that place would be turned into something that would destroy nature. And that was something I absolutely had to prevent. Lily and I did everything we could. But Anderson Construction's influence was overwhelming, and in the end, we were forced to head to their headquarters for negotiations with barely any leverage on our side. The Anderson Construction building stood tall, rising above the rest in a prime location in the city center. For Lily, this was a familiar place, yet her expression was tense. At the reception, we were treated like complete outsiders. We were then led into an extravagant meeting room. According to Lily, this room was reserved only for welcoming VIPs from overseas. Tension filled the air. Without even knocking, Mr. Anderson entered the room. And this was how he treated people he was supposed to be doing business with. I stood up and bowed, but he ignored me completely, heading straight to the largest chair in the room and dropping into it with a loud thud. I knew I couldn't let myself be intimidated. I had to speak first. But of course, this was a man who had built this company from the ground up. He wasn't someone to be underestimated. I apologize for how things have unfolded, but it's already decided. As you may have heard, that project is no longer under the city's control. We have secured an exclusive contract to handle it ourselves. That's all there is to discuss. I have another meeting, so if you'll excuse me. Wait a minute, Mr. Anderson. This doesn't make sense. Why did the city suddenly pull out? Why did this become an exclusive project for your company? I demand official documentation as proof. Dad. Well, Mr. Anderson, you're planning to do business the same way as always, just chasing profit, aren't you? Please, stop. Don't destroy that place. Neither my argument nor Lily's desperate plea seemed to reach him. As I stood there, the image of the lush landscapes and the faces of the residents flashed through my mind, the same vision Lily must have seen when she was cut off from her father. It felt like we had lost. But then, there was a knock at the door. A secretary entered. Excuse me, sir. Mr. Norton's associates have arrived. I have brought them here. Associates? What, did you bring some locals? Ha ha ha. Go ahead, let them in. Mr. Anderson, fully confident in his victory, didn't even bother to check who they were before waving them in. But I hadn't arranged for anyone to come. As confusion filled my mind, a familiar voice rang out. Sorry for being late. Wow, Mr. Anderson, that's quite the impressive chair you've got there today. It's been a while, Mr. Anderson. Keith. Monica. It was the two of them. Both Lily and I were stunned, but the most shocked of all was Mr. Anderson himself. Keith. You left this company without my permission, and now you dare to come back? And that idiot next to you. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this conversation is over. I had no idea what was about to happen, or what they were about to do. The first to act was Monica. She pulled out a stack of files from her bag. The moment Mr. Anderson saw the labels on them, his expression changed completely. Monica, her tone steady and unwavering, began speaking. "These are records of financial transactions, evidence of bid rigging. This one contains proof of your coercion and financial pressure on subcontractors. And this file lists all the details of your land deals over the past 15 years. What? This is nonsense. Absolute nonsense." Anderson lunged forward to snatch the files, but he tripped against the table and fell hard. Looking down at him, Monica continued. "I gathered these while I was still working here. And with the help of an NPO that handles land-related cases, I've been compiling evidence ever since. These documents prove, without a doubt, that you are a corrupt businessman." There was an intensity in her voice. A fierce determination completely unlike the usual warm and gentle Monica. Her fists clenched so tightly her nails dug into her palms as she steadied her breathing. "Henry, Lily, I'm sorry. I didn't do this to help you too. I've been collecting this evidence all along because of my own revenge." "Revenge?" Lily averted her gaze from Monica, her expression complicated. "My mother. She endured every unreasonable demand, serving in the Anderson household while raising me. I wanted to get her out of that prison-like house as soon as possible, so I studied desperately and got into a national university. Just so I could compete with you people who put so much value on academic prestige. That image of my mother. Being oppressed while your family treated it as normal. It's been burned into my mind all these years." Monica fired off her words without even pausing for breath. Then, gradually, she seemed to regain her composure. Mr. Anderson, now faced with undeniable evidence of his corruption and the sheer force of Monica's emotions, was nearly slipping out of his chair. "Revenge, you say? We took your mother in, gave her a place to live. You wouldn't have even survived without us. Don't be ridiculous. I haven't lost. I will keep winning. I will keep using people like you as stepping stones to rise even higher." His voice was laced with the pride of someone who had spent a lifetime building his empire. To an outsider, it might sound like nothing more than arrogance. But it was the desperate clinging of a man who refused to let go of what he had built. And everyone in the room could feel it. "Dad! Stop it already!" Lily had been silently holding a stiff expression, but as if she could no longer endure it, she suddenly stepped toward Mr. Anderson. Her brows furrowed deeply, as if recalling her father scolding her as a child, yet there was a determined look in her eyes. "Dad! You need to accept it. I may have just grown older, but I've realized that this idea of winning at all costs isn't the right path. I've listened to so many people, seen so many places. And thanks to Henry, I now understand that I still have room to grow." She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. Mr. Anderson didn't lash out in frustration this time. He simply watched her intently. "That's why, Dad. Let's start over. There's always a way, right? I'll be by your side no matter what. Let's rebuild together. Let's turn this company into one we can truly be proud of again. I want to help make that happen." They were words so honest and direct that her former, arrogant self as a wealthy heiress could never have imagined saying them. In Lily's voice, her determination was unmistakable. The woman who once flaunted her education and status had now learned what it meant to truly care for others. "Lily." Mr. Anderson's voice came out as a low murmur. From where I stood, I couldn't see his face, but I could tell his shoulders were trembling slightly. Was it from anger, or something else? "Dad. This isn't about winning or losing. What you've accomplished, building this company from nothing, it's incredible, and I truly respect you for it. But along the way, maybe you lost sight of something important. And I only just realized that myself. So please, let's start over. The air between them shifted. Something irreversible was changing in that moment. That's when Keith, who had been silent until now, finally stepped forward. Mr. Anderson, let's make things clear. I should have introduced myself earlier. I work at an auditing firm. My name is Keith. Auditing. Yes. I was previously involved in an investigation into your company, though it was left in a gray area back then. But this time is different. There's plenty to dig into your finances, your business operations, and I intend to do just that. Keith glanced in my direction, and I nodded. Then, I took a step forward and addressed Anderson myself. Mr. Anderson, I know this might sound like the naive words of a young man, but I don't believe you were always like this. I visited the earlier buildings constructed by Anderson Construction. I was truly moved by the quality and care that went into them. Please, why not start over and build something meaningful again? For a long moment, Mr. Anderson said nothing. Then, slowly, he stood up. His gaze swept across the room, lingering on each of us and finally, settling on Lily. To think I'd be swayed by the words of a bunch of kids. Ha! Lily, thank you for calling me your father. Dad. With a determined stride, Mr. Anderson walked out of the room, his demeanor now carrying a different kind of resolve. Lily, who had been slumped by her chair, was pulled up by Monica. Monica. Thank you. Thank you for giving my father, Mr. Anderson, a chance. To be honest, I was planning to leak everything. I wanted to destroy the Anderson, wipe it all out. Honestly, I regret ever stepping into Henry's office. I didn't want to see you working so hard, Lily. I didn't want to see you grow. Do you remember? When we were little, we cried together watching the cherry trees being cut down for expansion. Back then, I thought you weren't just some stuck-up heiress. Maybe you were just trapped in a cage all along. Tears streamed down Monica's face as she gripped Lily's hands tightly. Lily, in turn, squeezed back just as firmly. Monica. You're one of the people who changed me. You're important to me. So, can we be real friends this time? I've been thinking the same thing. As they awkwardly embraced, Keith and I exchanged a glance and laughed. 6 months later, the resort redevelopment project was successfully restarted. Parts of it had already opened to the public, transforming into a park where both locals and visitors could enjoy themselves, whether alone or with their families. With hot spring foot baths, restaurants, and scenic views, it had already started attracting attention from road trippers and bikers alike. But more than anything, this place, surrounded by nature, had become a source of healing for everyone who visited. The season of cherry blossoms is just around the corner. Surely, even more people will come to see them. Anderson Construction has been reviewing its past, tracing back over the last 20 years, investigating its existing structures, and taking appropriate actions against the companies and individuals involved. It became such a major issue that it even made headlines. Of course, there are many problems that neither apologies nor money can resolve. But the Mr. Anderson himself is personally taking responsibility for all of it. According to what Lily told me, her father said, rebuilding Anderson Construction as a proper construction company will be my final job. It will be a long journey, but I look forward to the day when the company regains its former pride. As for Lily, she's still working at my office. Her days are spent going back and forth, constantly busy with the resort facility project. Today, we came together to check on its progress. Mr. Norton, the cherry blossoms are about to bloom soon. With the expanded entrance area, the cherry tree-lined path will be beautiful. Oh, I need to send Monica a picture. Over the past 6 months, the relationship between Lily and Monica has changed a lot. Or perhaps, on the surface, nothing has changed at all. But when I listen to Lily talk about Monica, friendship feels like the most fitting word to describe them now. And Monica's words reflected that as well. On the last day of her contract with my firm, she called me over. "Henry, you know, Lily reminds me of a cherry tree." Maybe the real Lily has always been waiting for someone who would let her bloom freely. And now, she's finally found that person. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Monica. And just you wait, I'm going to bloom into a flower so beautiful it'll surprise you. "Thank you, Henry." She said it with a radiant smile before walking away without hesitation. Now, she's been promoted and is thriving on the front lines of her company. "Mr. Norton." "Mr. Norton?" "Henry." "Ha? Oh, sorry. Ha, it's been a while since you called me by my name. I was trying to be brave and call you that, but then you became a CEO, and now it feels weird." "Oh. Look. That cherry blossom is blooming." "Oh, you're right. Let's wait until they're in full bloom." As I admired the delicate blossoms, I suddenly felt a gentle touch on my arm. When I looked down, Lily was staring at me, her face bright red. "When the cherry blossoms are in full bloom. I've been wanting to see them with you somewhere bright this time. But no, wait. In the daylight. It's too embarrassing." She tried to pull away, but I didn't let go of her hand. Turning even redder, she looked back at me. Instead of holding her arm, I softly took her hand in mine. "The cherry blossoms have only just started to bloom. And every year, they'll bloom again in full glory. If we can stand together and watch over them like this, that would make me really happy. What about you, Lily?" Her voice trembled as she held back tears, then she suddenly threw her arms around me. I wrapped my other arm around her, holding her close. "Lily, look. They're beautiful." The wind carried delicate cherry blossoms around us, dancing through the air. Beyond the sky we gazed up at together. I felt as if I could see a future where the nature facility was in full bloom with cherry blossoms, filled with people smiling and enjoying themselves. Fate, whether kind or cruel, may feel more significant or more disposable as we grow older. But in the end, I want to live a life where I cherish the person I have become, shaped by every connection I have made.